And a very good morning to you. It's just coming up to 5 minutes past 6 o'clock. It's Thursday, the 1st of December. It's me, with you until 6:30 when Julia Hartley-Burrow will be here for your breakfast show. Still to come, we turn our attention to the papers. Going to be joined live in the studio by Paul Britton, leading criminal defence lawyer. We'll be going through the front pages and also the stories within. Plus, we continue our conversation about another race row engulfing the royal household. The accusation that it's institutionally racist. Well, the 83-year-old at the centre of the row has stepped aside. The comments that she made undoubtedly inappropriate, but the question is, does what happened at the palace show that Britain is institutionally racist? That's what I'm asking you this morning. It's 0344 499 1000. Plus, we turn our attention to the papers and the stories within. We'll find out who owns Britain's water firms. We'll be talking about, yes, that story on the front pages. But also, what about pensioners? How long are you going to have to work? When you're going to be able to claim your pension even? We'll find out about police cells, whether or not they're full, and indeed finding out about the average age for buying your first property. So all sorts of stories still to come, plus we'll be taking more of your calls. That's all to come here on Early Breakfast with me, James Banks, here on TalkTV. Now, if you're listening to TalkTV and Talk Radio, you might want to watch us as well. I know, we're on telly. Sky 522, Virgin 606, Freeview 237 and FreeSat 217. Or you can watch via YouTube and indeed the TalkTV app. So plenty of ways to get involved. Hello, good morning, and join the telly. Why not? Meanwhile, Paul Britton, leading criminal defence lawyer, joins me live in the studio. Paul, good morning.
Very good morning, James.
Thank you very much indeed for coming in. So, look, it's the story that dominates all the front pages and then goes for pages in between. Meet and greet that sparked a royal disaster is the front page of today's Daily Mail. Queen's lady-in-waiting forced to quit after asking a charity guest, what part of Africa are you from? I mean, what I'm fascinated about here is it's very clear that Lady Susan Hussey pursued a line of questioning that you shouldn't pursue.
Vigorously pursued. She was going to get it out of her one way or the other. And maybe if the British, maybe it could have been more forthcoming at the beginning and brought it to an end.
But what the story also doesn't go into is Ngozi Fulani. She does have form on the other side. So I actually think that on this she is right. So I think Ngozi is right to pick this out and to say that she felt uncomfortable. I think anybody would feel uncomfortable given that line of questioning. That having been said, she has accused the palace of being racist in the past. She has accused them of being racist because they wouldn't put Harry and Meghan on the balcony when there was a royal event, as opposed to, no, we're not putting you on the balcony because you've stepped down from royal duties. So I think she's got form, and combined with the fact that she did dress in a way, if you have a look at the way that she dressed compared to everybody else in the room, she's clearly identifying her heritage in her dress. And maybe what Lady Susan Hussey should have said, the way that you've dressed demonstrates that you have a rich cultural heritage. Can you tell me more?
Well, I think they're all very fair.
Do you think that would be fair?
I think they're all very fair points, James. But what's really sad is we're never going to find out now, are we? We're never going to speak to Susan Hussey. She's never going to come forward and say, well, actually, my thought process was this. It's all just going to
I would like to interview her on the basis that here is somebody who spent 60 years at the side of Her Majesty the Queen. And, by the way, you know what her husband did?
Go on.
Her husband used to be Director General and indeed Chairman of the Board of Governors, rather, at the BBC, Marmaduke Hussey.
Right. So
she has lived a very rarefied and interesting life.
And she would know which way to go when it comes to these sort of conversations. And
you would have thought.
Look, as a criminal defence lawyer, there's always two sides to every story, and it's quite easy to be pulled. If you've only got one narrative, then you just get pulled in one direction, and the papers have done what they always do, and they've gone
So they've all
way.
sided on one side without necessarily giving the full story, and I understand that. Having said that, do you think that there is an argument to say, and this is going to sound ageist, but there is a certain age at which maybe you should no longer be involved in particularly official receptions at an institution like the palace?
No, but maybe people of a certain age should be given a get-out-of-jail-free card and maybe a pass when they make a mistake.
This is a pretty big mistake.
Well...
Yeah. Do you think she should have been given a free pass? It's like, oh, we'll let you stay there.
I don't know the other side of the story. you know, we've only got one narrative. Based on this narrative, it seems pretty bad and pretty damning. But if you heard the other story, if Susan Hussey was here now, maybe we would be saying something different.
Because maybe what she would try and say is, she would possibly say, well, look, given the way that this individual was dressed, given the way that she spoke...
She may make the points that you've made, but without getting her on the show... Maybe we should reach out and see
the offer is there. Meanwhile, we'll come back to some more front pages, because funnily enough, every single front page is dominated by this story. Trish is in Ipswich. Trish, morning.
Good morning, James.
Good morning, Trish. So, look, here we have another situation. It's a right old royal row. Do you think Britain is institutionally racist?
Not at all. We're one of the most tolerant countries in the world.
With that in mind, and I would agree with you, by the way, I'm getting a lot of incoming from people who seem to think that I've gone some sort of liberal left and whatever. I think I've tried to be as fair as I possibly can on the basis that if one understands, and I've been through a lot of training over the years from the companies that I work for and various other things, to understand what racism is, to understand what anti-Semitism is, to understand what homophobia is, all sorts of things, so that I can at least understand. And if you're going to do this job, Trish, then one has to have an understanding of all these things in order to comply with the rules of the land.
I think she was just inappropriately worded. I think she should have said, where is your heritage from? And the lady that she spoke to was a bit too sensitive about it all. I mean, she goes to that event dressed, as you said to the previous chap on the tally, in her traditional clothing, and she doesn't expect to be queried about it. I mean, it's a conversation starter, isn't it? Oh, you know, you look absolutely wonderful. What is your heritage?
And so you think it's more unfortunate phraseology, but then what some people would say is, if somebody had white skin, you wouldn't pursue that line of questioning.
You might do if they had an accent. You might say, well, I understand you know, you sound as if you're from some other country. Where are you originating from? I mean, it's a conversation starter. And the lady from the palace, she didn't go there with that intention to lose her job and to be racist.
No, I agree not. And then also... I don't think, as Paul, who's in the studio with me, says, there are always two sides to a story. And the story on this with Ngozi Fulani is that here is somebody who has accused the palace of being racist in the past.
Oh, well, there you go. I mean, she shouldn't be so sensitive. And you have to be tolerant. And if somebody's said something inappropriately, just mention it to them. Say, well, what? But then if you see the line of questioning, and I have to say, I'm not sure there is a defence to this. So the conversation, as it's reported, is that Lady Susan Hussey said, "Where are you from?" Ngozi replied, "Sister Space." "No, where do you come from?" "We're based in Hackney," says Fulani. Hussey then goes, "What part of Africa are you from?" Fulani says, "I don't know. They didn't leave any records." Hussey says, "Well, you must know where you're from. I spent time in France. Where are you from?" And Fulani says, "Here in the UK." Hussey then goes, "No, but what nationality are you?" And Fulani says, I'm born here. I am British." "No, but where do you really come from? Where do your people come from?" "My people," says Fulani. "Lady, what is this?" Hussey says, "Oh, I can see I'm going to have a challenge getting to you to say where you're from. When did you first come here?" "Lady, I'm a British national. My parents came here in the 1950s. "Oh, I knew we'd get there in the end. You're Caribbean," says Hussey. Fulani says, "No, lady, I'm of African Caribbean descent and British nationality." So, I mean, it's all very unfortunate. I think she was purposely being awkward in the way she responded. She obviously knew that the lady from the palace was wanting to know what her heritage was, and she was out to make a point, and to obviously, she's lost the lady her job.
Paul is here. You're a leading criminal defence lawyer. Where do you stand on this now? You've heard what Trish has to say.
Well, I mean, it was a good question. Trish, I totally agree with you about sensitivity, and I think you may have hit the nail on the head with the icebreaker. I was at an event last night, and probably 4 separate white gentlemen who I was speaking to I'd never met before, and I said to them, "So where are you from?" And straight away, Moldova, Poland, and they tell you Brussels. They come. It is a very good icebreaker. Where are you from? I think what's happened here is,
Do you think, though, if somebody says, where are you from, and they say the company, and then they say, no, where,
that normally follows, what do you do? Yes. And then you say, oh, I'm from...
So do you think that, the individual concerned here, Ngozi, she answered it like that because she knew what Lady Hussey wanted to know?
She was baiting Lady Hussey too.
Do you think she was baiting Lady? So you say, this is a new line of discussion that we're having. Trish, we leave it there just for time reasons. Thank you so much for that. Let's just go very quickly to Graham, who's in Lincolnshire. Graham, morning.
Good morning. It was just
James. Is the name you're looking for? Yeah.
Yeah. Good morning, Joe.
Yeah. Good morning, Graham.
Basically, I grew up in West London. My school was in Portobello Road.
Yes.
And I'm very nearly 60 now. And at that time that I was growing up, there was a pretty balanced, mixed. As you can imagine, I used to go to school. Sometimes I'd see them making the floats for the Notting Hill Carnival.
Yes.
Even the Sweeney being made. Anyway, I've always had a kind of a different, if you like, a backward step, and then looking at the bigger picture, and it's to do with race. And the way that I see race is we're all, and when we talk about race in the context of the human race, well, we all fall under that. And really, can you be? The way I see it is, can you, a bit like a football team where you've played on a side that hasn't played very well, none of you have scored goals, but you all start blaming each other. Well, you were on the same team. And in that context, can you really be racist against the human race if you're part of it?
Yeah, but then on the other hand, I suppose the point here is that would you have pursued that line of questioning had either this individual not been dressed in the way that she was dressed, or had the skin colour that she had?
Well, yeah, I accept that. Obviously there's a difference in colour, and if you're going to identify a difference in colour and then make an assumption based on that, but really mine was more specific about the, if you like, the race card that gets played overly too much, in my view. But it is really just has anybody got an answer? Because when I've asked the question, well, I'm part of the human race, and I've got friends that obviously I grew up in school that and I'm white myself, but they were black. And you ask that question, and nobody seems to have an answer to it because...
No, I guess they don't. Graham, we'll just leave it there for time reasons, but thank you for your call. Look, we're going to come back to some calls if we can, but what happened at the Palace, does that show that Britain's institutionally racist, is the question. But also, we've got an awful lot to do. We've got to go through the front page of the papers. The Guardian leads on that story, but also we talk about who owns England's water firms. We'll talk about that story in a moment. The meet and greet that sparked a royal disaster is the front page of the Daily Mail. That story also on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. But also we've got strikes on every day until Christmas. It's a lovely old advent calendar of strikes that we've got between now and Christmas Day. The Mirror, Prince William's godmother quits in race row is their lead story. The Daily Express, again, that story. Prince William condemns godmother in palace race row. Take one for the team, says the Daily Star. Let us give you an advent calendar. Well done, the Daily Star. The Sun talks about I am the one and only Three Lions mascot. This is pop star Chesney Hawkes. Right. The newspaper, UK playing with fire after COVID jabs U-turn, warn the scientists. The Financial Times talks about Brussels turning the heat on Musk over Twitter. And the Metro, Palace in race row. So where are you really from? Royal 8 quits after quitting British charity founder at Camilla reception. OK, all sorts to talk about. We'll talk about the stories that Paul's picked out in a few moments' time here on TalkTV. .22 is the time. It's me, James Max, with you until 6:30 when Julia Hartley-Burr will be here. Talking to Paul Britton, he's a leading criminal defence lawyer. We're discussing the big stories of the day. We've kind of been through our front pages, which are dominated by Lady Susan Hussey, and indeed that whole conversation. Meanwhile, let's go to the Guardian newspaper. I'm just going to get my marigolds. The Guardian, which talks about who owns England's water firms. What does it say?
70% of England's water firms in foreign hands. We've got Severn Trent with 4.6% holdings, Qatar Investment Authority, and then a firm in the US has 10% of that. And then Abu Dhabi Investment Authority has, again, a 10% stake in Thames Water.
Does it matter?
Well, this all stems from the 80s when Thatcher sold it all into
Baroness
private
Thatcher,
hands.
thank you very much.
Baroness Thatcher, sorry, of course. Sold it into private ownership, and at the time was good for the Water Authority. Pollution came down, services increased, leaks were reduced by a third within just 10 years.
I mean, doesn't it just show more... I think we spend too much time worrying about who owns stuff and not enough time worrying about how we govern them and how we regulate them, particularly if they're a virtual monopoly.
The problem we've just had is we've had several hosepipe bans. The reservoirs are running out of water, and everyday people are being asked to turn their hoses off to conserve water. Leaks are at astronomical records, and it's just not going the way it should. And when
but that's because we've got a larger population than we had before, and those firms haven't been either encouraged or forced to invest and reinvest in new infrastructure.
Well, that's the point.
A failure of regulation.
But that's the salient point, isn't it? They're not being held to account, and who do we now hold to account?
The regulator, who have been asleep at the wheel again. It's time after time. It's not about who owns stuff, in my view. It's about how things are regulated and what they're asked to do and what they're forced to do.
I mean, some of the stakeholders are untraceable. According to The Guardian, I think 83% has been traced back, with the others just being impossible to trace back to who actually owns them.
So it doesn't matter. I mean, I genuinely think that you hold the company to account because they're there and they're there to do a job, and then you hold the regulator to account because they're the people who are supposed to plan and make sure that, government is not there to provide everything for us. Government is there to facilitate.
So when does that process start? Because we're at a point now where, like everything in this country, we get to the point where it's going to break. I mean,
yes.
The World Cup in Qatar.
But then also, let's also not forget, though, that one of the reasons that, if anybody thought that this is the first time that we've had hosepipe bans or anything else, think again. We had a very hot summer in the same way back in 1976 when we had a very hot summer. Funnily enough, there was a hosepipe ban, and the companies were owned by the government. It makes no difference.
But then we have massive wet winters like the one that we're having now.
And the hosepipe ban has ended.
Well, of course, but now what are we doing with that rainfall that's coming down? Are we storing it?
Of course we are. And it's going into the aquifers. That's what it does. You can't store it all in reservoirs.
But as you said, we've got an increase in population. There are more people now. Those reserves that we had previously are just not enough. And if there's not more investment going into future reserves, we are going to see, and climate change isn't going away. It's going to continue to warm. We've had an exceptionally warm summer, but who's to say that we're not going to have those summers again and again and again?
But this comes down to planning and infrastructure.
It does.
And what it comes down to is, I think we spent too much time worrying about who owns stuff and not enough time looking at the people who either set the policy, i.e. government, and they haven't, or the regulator and what they should be doing, which they haven't.
I mean, this could be the next big crisis in this country, particularly if...
Everybody likes a crisis. Talking of crisis, are we ever going to be able to retire?
According to the Mail, page 2, pension age may rise sooner than we had thought. Under the current plans, you would be retiring at 66, by 2028, 67, and by 20... be retiring at 68, and they're talking about bringing it forward to 68. You'll be retiring at 68 by 2033, and it could save the taxpayer billions.
Well, work longer and forever is basically you pay into the system for longer and work harder and then get nothing back.
Well, I mean,
meanwhile, just turning to police cells, we've run out of prison spots, haven't we?
We've had a problem. I mean, it really stems from the barrister strikes and the solicitor strikes. and all of a sudden the courts have an influx of cases, lots of people being sentenced. The prison population has risen from 79,800 to 82,700, and frankly, we're running out of cells.
We are, and this is one of those solutions that maybe we should be using those police cells. Meanwhile, we're almost out of time, but let's have a quick conversation about this. The Times talks about the average age for buying a property.
Yeah, up to 37. And when they polled first-time buyers and asking why they're not buying properties, 86% of them have said that it's because of the cost of living crisis, with 10% saying that they can't raise the money for the deposit. And as we know, inflation is at a 41-year high, James, at 11.1%.
Absolutely. And look, looking at one of those, issues, I suppose, is, quite why the government haven't changed the tax system to encourage people not only to put money into savings, but then also to invest and to aspire to have a home, combined with the fact that with our mortgage system appears to be sort of driven by what's going on in the Bank of England. Who only knows? Anyway, I guess, that's all stuff that we can continue to have a conversation about. Paul, thank you so much for joining us this morning and for going through the papers. If people want to find out more about you and what you do, is there somewhere they can go?
They can go to BrittonTime.com or just Google Britton and Time Solicitors, and we're normally up the top there somewhere.
Thank you very much indeed, and thanks very much indeed for going through the papers. Just time for us to say very good morning quickly to Julia Hartley-Brewer. Hello.
Very quick indeed, a bit late to do. Yeah, we're going to be talking about that royal race row, strikes till Christmas, you name it, it's on the show.
You name it, it's on the show. It's a very busy news day, funnily enough, and Julia will be here with breakfast. That's next here on TalkTV. Funnily enough, I'll be back tomorrow from 5. I very much hope you'll join me then for early breakfast. Meanwhile, it's now time for the news headlines at 6:30.